All right, welcome back. Happy Tuesday. We are January 20th. I want to jump right in. This is week 3 back in restarting the Main of Class podcast. The the topic that I wanted to get into today is I called it the big domino of health. Because too often what we end up finding is we start with January, get all excited, right? We want to go do all these cool things. And usually what it comes down to is that we run out of energy because we go, 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 go. We try to stack everything. We try to add the routine, and we try to add eating healthier, and we try to, take away the bad stuff. And we try to do so much that it oftentimes overwhelms us, and then we get burned out, and then we move away from it. So that being said, how can we start to dissect and maybe put a little bit of pause in how we're starting the new year? And this is probably the second year that I've started doing this. Um, Last year, I started really doing like a deep dive into vitamins and just like overall just deficiencies. I kind of stumbled into the food that we're eating today just doesn't have as high quality, like all the nutrition necessary. There's a lot of, if you go to just processed foods in general, like there's just way more processed foods that are out there. And which, I get the necessary piece of it. Like there's a lot of people that go out there and they just hate, like, oh, all this processed food and it's horrible. Well, it was essentially necessary. We we had to scale up the food industry, the supply chain, if you will, to handle more people in the world. So great, we did that, but now we at some point had sacrificed quality for that, so now we have to go back and figure that piece of it out. And along the way, we had used it as a convenience too, because before, when you had to make everything from scratch, that was great, but then you had to make everything from scratch. So things didn't last as long as they didn't have as much preservatives. So preservatives helps to make the same food last longer, so that we don't have as much waste. So I understand and can appreciate all the different problems that the previous generations and just where we had gone as a society had to deal with. But as you understand and reflect and respect the past, but then you kind of look at the future and say, now what do I want to go do with this? So we call it a year. It may have been even a little bit longer ago, but I just wasn't feeling like I had as much energy. I would feel like I needed a lot of naps, and just wasn't quite there. And so then people were like, "Well, you're not sleeping right. You need to exercise." And it's like, well, we're on a homestead. I get plenty of exercise. Walk over 10,000 steps a day. So like that aspect of it wasn't. But then a lot of people had said, "Well, you're just burning yourself out." I'm like, or you're getting too old. That was the other one I loved when they were like, "Oh, you're just getting old. Like that's just welcome to getting old." Sure, not really buying that, not really wanting to accept that. Should be a podcast for a whole other separate reason. But in general, I just was struggling with that, and I said, okay, so if I break down the very basic essence, and I went through this whole water journey. That was probably a couple years ago, but just in general, I started looking at just building blocks and say, okay, the water that I'm drinking, what is in it? Because there's water standards across the whole board. So I did a lot of research in it and then said, okay, based on all the stuff that is in there and the studies that were coming out around fluoride and how that is actually a neurotoxin versus um, what had been helping, right? Back then we thought it was added in for the water to help your teeth and that whole piece of it. But that being said, like we're now realizing, hey, that was actually a neurotoxin. So chlorine, obviously, again, isn't really a great thing to drink, but it's necessary in order to keep the water sanitized throughout, however long that the water has to transfer. So I get and understand all that. But when I looked at it, and I said, okay, is this what I really want in my body? And it was like, years and years. Hindsight is always 2020. So going back, like I had kidney stones and um trying to piece that together that said like, well, okay, A, why do I have it? B, am I always going to have it? And C, wow, that was a lot of pain. Like I don't know if anybody has had kidney stones, but if you haven't, please don't, because they're not fun things. For those that have, you understand that it's just a lot of pain. And so, piecing together, hey, I had some kidney stones, had, solved that with water. But really, it kind of had been opening my eyes more and more to what are all the things that I need to go do in order to allow myself to go out there and operate at high intensity the way I want to go do life, and kind of do it at the capacity that I wanted to go do it without having to um, sacrifice and give up the things that I really wanted to go do. And so the whole water journey, we now have reverse osmosis water, and then we add the minerals back in. So it's like we strip water down to its very basic, um, removes all the contaminants and everything, and then we purposefully add back in the things that we know that we need, which is magnesium, sodium, and potassium, right? Those electrolytes that we need, which I'll get into a little bit later. But in doing so, it really caused me to open up and say, like, okay, we have to take better control, or we have to be better stewards of the things that are coming into our life. And we say that with relationships, with boundaries, but it's also true in the nitty gritty physical things, i.e., water and food. And so, knowing that and fast forwarding now to about a year ago, where I was just kind of feeling lethargic and I wasn't really sure kind of where and what to go do. Questioning, was this just age? Was this just what I needed to go deal with and just be okay with? And and it was also at a time where I was trying to do more too. So that's hard when you feel like you want to be able to do more. You feel like you should be able to go do more, but you physically can't. Your body can't. Very hard thing mentally to be able to overcome. And so I started really looking at and say, okay, so if I did this for water, now what am I going to go do for everything else? So I started really going deep into vitamins and just the actual deficiencies, and like what happens in the body when you do have deficiencies. And so I started down, one of many different rabbit holes, and the one of the things that I found out was that the top three vitamin deficiencies that we exist, so let me see if I can just do a quick share screen. Because I'm trying something new this week for those that are just listening. So I'm going live on YouTube, and I'm trying to essentially, wow, that's trippy. But try to go through and come up with like a better recording solution. So anyway, so when you go to Google and you just say, hey, what are the top three vitamin deficiencies in men? What it comes up with is vitamin D, B12, and iron. Now, it also talks about magnesium and some of the other vitamins that are down below. But really, what initially started this was, okay, I need better vitamins, and I start with my day, and it I just have it as starting out with B12. Well, then I realized that, okay, what is in B12, or like the B complex, like all the different B vitamins that you have. And so you have like folic acid and folate, and the differences between where B9 actually comes from and the value of B9. In B12, there's two different forms of it. What I learned was that there's cyanocobalamin and methylcobalamin. So both of them are essentially the cobalt piece of this, right? Which kind of opened me up into another big aha, which was our bodies are very much like a machine in some ways, where it requires a lot of these different minerals and nutrients in order to go function. And so, it's really interesting as an engineer. I'm like, oh wait, cobalt. Like I know cobalt. I see that, right? But to see it where we say that's actually something that we need, and where and how everything gets processed. And so recognizing that cyanocobalamin comes from a methylated version of where they go through and have cyanide react with it. But then the methylcobalamin is a methylated version, which is more, I'll say a healthier approach to it. Not made in a lab, basically. So I started really looking into that, and I was like, okay, so start with that. So start with just one thing and then trial how it went. And what I found was that I actually felt better. Like my energy was up. In the mornings I had more energy, and I was like, okay, sweet. That's good. Like that's a feedback loop. And it's very tricky, because when you get into taking different supplements, you almost have to separate yourself out to say, was this a placebo effect, or was this actual reality? And there's science that you could say doesn't really much matter, right? If it is a placebo effect, then you're getting the benefits of it anyway, so great. But for some things where it's like if your end goal is to try to feel better, then yes, maybe you can use is it something like a placebo effect that turns out to be real or not doesn't much matter. But for something around like immune function and immune system, like you do need to see, is this helping or is this hurting? And so from the energy standpoint with the B12, I said, I actually feel more alive. I feel more energy. So, okay, great. Like that's one piece. That's a vitamin that kind of stays. So then I was going through and would go into a period where I would start to get a little bit, I would get sick. And then I was like, okay, so if people around me are getting sick and then I get sick, I've always just bought into the fact that, well, if there's sickness around me, then I'm just going to get sick. And I started questioning that belief too. And I said, well, how true does that have to be? Because there's also people where they just don't get sick. Like there's been, they haven't gotten a common cold or they haven't gotten a virus or whatever for like the past 5 years. So you go, okay, sweet. So that limiting belief doesn't have to be true. Maybe I've made it true for myself, but it doesn't mean that it has to be true. And so I went down and I said, okay, based on again those top three vitamin deficiencies, vitamin D. So then I went down another rabbit hole and read this really cool book. Let me try to find it here. I'll say I didn't read it. I guess I listened to it. I'm big on audiobooks, side tangent, because audiobooks you can listen to while you're doing whatever. And then usually I have it at like 1.5 speed so that it's just a faster way. Because when people fill the silence and then, talk really slowly, it's hard for me to not just want to speed them up fast, right? So, audiobook, wonderful for that. But I picked up this book and it was called like The Miraculous Results of Extreme High Doses of Vitamin D3, a year-long experiment with huge doses and sunshine hormone from 25,000 to 100,000 IUs a day. It was a book by Jeff T. Bowles, Bowles, and it was really interesting because I learned a lot about vitamin D, such as, when it was initially discovered, we said, it's an oil or a fat-based, there's like water-based, water-soluble vitamins, and then there's fat-soluble vitamins. And water-soluble doesn't matter. You can't overdose on it. You just pee it right out, which is like like the whole B complex, which is why when you take B and you have a surplus in it, all of a sudden your pee turns neon. That's just because your body has absorbed as much as it can for the day, and it's just going to flush the rest of it out. But for fat soluble vitamins, there's that risk of overdose. And so, one of the cool things is that he had said back in like the 19 teens or like 1920s, they changed how they were orienting or how they were measuring, I'll say, the vitamin. And so they went from milligrams to something called IUs, which is industrial units. And at that time, I can't remember the number, so don't quote me on it, but it was somewhere around like 20,000 or something like that IUs. Maybe it was 10 or 20, I can't remember what it was. But it was like really high. And over time they had kind of eroded that and like said, no, 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 you can run the risk of overdosing. And so they whittled it all the way down to like 1,000 IUs of vitamin D. And so, when I started reading that, I was like, okay, well, that A is interesting. So I did fact check that. But then B, I was like, okay, well, what would happen, or like, what was life back maybe in the teens and the 20s? And you start doing some of that research, and you're like, wait a second, they were just really healthy individuals. Like sickness wasn't, obesity wasn't. Like they had just a really healthy, a vibrant society. And so, one of the things he talks about is that vitamin D was they didn't really know how to categorize it, and so, there's always these theories of, like, was it categorized correctly or not, but it essentially acts like a steroid in your body, which is why it can work so well, and, like, it works so well at your immune function. So, read all that and started doing more and more doses with vitamin D, and then I realized the whole relationship that it was vitamin D and vitamin K and then, magnesium. So, magnesium helps to transport all of the vitamins, right, throughout your body, much like vitamin D. But the interesting thing is that you need all these building blocks. So, imagine trying to build a house with just nails, right? You couldn't build a very good house with just nails. Or imagine how big of a house could you build when you're limited by 20 shingles, right? You're only going to build a house that you can have with 10 or 20 shingles. And so, the interesting thing that I found was like, okay, your body uses all of these different nutrients if I will, right? You have like macronutrients and you have micronutrients and you have like these minerals and whatnot, vitamins and minerals, and that could be probably your micronutrients. And within that, what I realize is like your body needs certain things and certain amounts of things and like ratios in order to go process it. So if you took a lot of vitamin D, but then you didn't have magnesium to transport it through the body, then you could end up in that function where maybe you have some, your body's not utilizing it in a way that it needs to. I'm being cautious to say the word overdose because I think there is, but the right way to actually test it is not through what am I taking orally, but really through like what is your blood work coming back into, which brings into like another big chapter. So experimented with it, ended up actually, I think I'm at like 20,000 IUs of vitamin D with vitamin K and with magnesium. And what I noticed was that we no longer got sick anymore. Um, a really, really interesting thing is we would go, I travel a lot. And so um, I would get on planes where people were sneezing, coughing, hacking, everything. And I would come back home without being sick. Or there were, you go into an office space or you go into a store and like everybody's just sick, or you go to a family function and people are sick. And it's just like we weren't getting sick. And I did the same thing with Amber as well. And um, it just opened my eyes to the fact that deficiencies are a real thing. It's not something that we necessarily even think about or talk about. A lot of times when we think of deficiencies, it's like, well, I have to have something so bad that I go to the doctor. And then the doctor will say, well, let me do blood work. And then are you in the range? And if you're not in the range, maybe we need to increase a little bit. But if you're somewhat within that range, then, you would just be considered, quote, normal. And what I learned to find was, again, if you want normal results and you're okay with whatever it is, wherever your blood work is, that's great. But for me, it was I just wasn't living the quality of life that I was really expecting in my mind. And so making some of these changes with supplements had really was a big game changer in my life, because it really took me from living a level that was surviving and being able to get stuff done, but just very exhausted through the day, or having to require a lot of willpower, wake up in the morning and I have to, just take an extra shot of espresso in order to get me through the day. And it turned out that I just it was like I could never get ahead. I would get enough to do something, but then I would always pay for it on the back end. I would sleep longer the next day. And then it's like if I was double productive on one day and then half as productive the next day, then I might as well just be mediocre productive every single day, basically. Was never getting out of that rat race. And so it was a really cool experience when I started seeing this stuff. Like when I started taking the vitamin D, K, and magnesium, it was like, okay, I can see that I'm feeling better. Like I wake up and I have more energy. I don't feel like I'm getting sick as often. And magnesium is one of those that it has, what was it? I was reading this really cool thing, and I'm always blown away every time I go and research more about magnesium. It's crazy. Magnesium is needed for more than 300 biochemical reactions, which is why when we say, I showed like the top three vitamin deficiencies. When you look at that, it's like, well, magnesium, the way I equate it is like magnesium is the nails in the body. It doesn't stay in the body for very long, but it has a lot of purposes. And you have to have a healthy amount of magnesium constantly in your body to be able to serve those over 300 functions that is required in the body. And it just reminded me again where like our bodies is in some ways like an equation. If you give it this, this, and this, then you'll be able to go perform this, this, and this. But if you take that stuff away, then sooner or later you're gonna be get robbed on it on the backside. And I remember we had a dog that passed in that same ish type time frame. And this was another point that like really came home. I said, why is it was Daisy, our dog, our little Shih Tzu. And I was like, It doesn't make sense. Daisy just was completely fine, like a normal dog. Everything was great. And then all of a sudden she declined really quickly in a matter of a day or two. And then she died. And I was talking to the vet, like, is there something I'm missing? What is going on? How did this happen so quickly? And the vet had said that the dog's anatomy, and the same is true for humans as well, which I thought was really interesting. But that when you have a deficiency in something, your body will balance out the checkbook. And what I mean by that is it will make sure that it will balance everything. So like that, the equation that it's like, okay, if you need vitamin D, K, and magnesium, but you don't have magnesium, the body will go out into the rest of your body and say, joints, you have extra magnesium, I'm gonna steal some from that. Or if there's magnesium in your tendons, I'm gonna go rob some of that magnesium because I need to balance out this equation to be able to make more cells in order to keep, the billions and trillions of cells that are multiplying every single day in our system. And which means that when you have a deficiency, you can go for a long period of time before you actually see any physical manifestation come out. And so in that instance, the doctor was like, we don't know. Like there could have been some deficiency that had been going on that then all of a sudden it turned into, whatever had happened. And so she was like, it's really incredible. Like the dog anatomy is very incredible. That's why dogs, they might be a little bit achy, but then all of a sudden they'll blow a joint or a bone will break or they just don't have the strength anymore to stand up, and it's like their body has been stealing from all of their parts for a long period of time, and then all of a sudden something big happens. They go to step, and then all of a sudden a bone breaks. And the same for us as well. Um, it's really, really remarkable and interesting and fascinating, more so that we have that ability to essentially look for leading indicators in our body of things that are trying to tell us, like, hey, something's not right. But you can only hear, "Hey, something's not right," if you're listening. And that kinda brings into, again, why I wanted to bring this topic up for January, for the beginning of the year, because so many of us are trying to, whether it's lose weight or go do more things or, stop the junk food, whatever that it might be, and it requires what's called, like, a big domino in order to help get ahead, because little nips and tucks can sometimes not get you to the areas that you're ultimately trying to get to. And so, the thing that again I realized is, I think Russell Brunson talks about it, and it this is an entrepreneurial space, but what he talks about is a thing called like the big domino, where he's like, hey, if you can solve the big domino, which is like the big problem for your clients, then everything else kind of falls away. Um, And, the way I always take that bit of information and I go, well, that's true in really all of life. If we can figure out wherever that big domino is, then everything else starts to make sense. So for us, if we're trying to be healthier individuals, we're trying to eat healthier, we're trying to do more things and have more energy and everything else, what's that one big domino? And it's and I you kind of work your way back and you say, okay, if I need to go do more things, that requires more energy. Well, where do I get more energy from? Being able to make sure that you have all the right micronutrients that are going on, because that also affects sleep quality. So all these things are somewhat intertwined, but if you boil down like sleep quality, it could be root cause could be that it could be a mattress, it could be a pillow, it could be it's not cold enough. Like there's so many different things of what it could be, but there's a lot of science that shows that not having, I think it's like enough magnesium oxide in the system, that it gives like restless sleep. Not having enough magnesium also can be linked to anxiety, because it's just again, when we have deficiencies in the body, it manifests itself into things that we see on the outside, but we can only see them if we're actually paying attention and looking for something. Like, is this really optimal, or is this something that I need to go address? I need to go fix. And so, for me, like that big domino was this whole nutrition piece of this, not just necessarily like eating fruits and veggies and meats and all that, but it's really, am I getting the right nutrition, the micronutrients in with all of the regular food? Um, and so, that's kind of had been my journey. So fast forward to where we're at is made some links along the way that said, okay, all this nutrition is very important. Now let me go do a deep dive in the pill industry, like all the supplement industry. And then I realized that there's a crap load of money within the supplement industry, where the amount of money that it takes to make it versus what you pay can be very big, which I get, right? I mean, everything is a business and that's okay. But what I also found is that not all nutrients and not all vitamins are the same, right? The how much of said amount is in there, as well as, the quality, like where is it actually coming from? And so then I kind of realized, hey, wait a second, there might be something more to this. That what if I could go back a step and actually make it myself? So now we've gotten into the pill making where we just make our own vitamins. But what that has enabled me to do is, instead of filling it with fillers that maybe I don't need or is just kind of junk, I can supplement and say, well, I maybe will use psyllium powder, which helps, which is extra fiber, right? And guys are notorious, we need more fiber in our diet. That's a whole cholesterol story that I could save for another day. But but it's like I could choose what the filler needed to be in order to make the amount of powder per pill work. And I could find and source where I wanted each nutrient to come from. And so, and like how much of it. And if there's certain things that I know don't work well for bioavailability, which is just a fancy pants terms for how much uptake can you actually get. So if you're taking, call it, 500 milligrams of magnesium, or is your body actually absorbing all of it? Or is it only getting maybe 50% of it? So you think you're taking 500, but you're really only getting 200, and you might still be having a deficiency. And so just learning that whole thing. And so now that I've spent the past couple weeks where I've just been making all the pills for the future year, so that again, we just keep ourselves healthy and happy and have that energy. So when life gets busy, when it turns into springtime or summer time, travel time, whatever it is, we have all the necessary nutrition already done, paying our future selves forward, which is a whole thing all by itself that you can use as a tool, right, to make your life easier. Is what can you do today that will make your future life that much better? And so, part of the reason why I wanted to talk about this again as well is that I see so many guys just living and pushing and sacrificing sleep, and you can just see like they're just getting more and more and more wore down. Like the bags under their eyes are getting bigger. The creases in their skin, their hair is falling out. Like you can just tell that these dudes are just stressed beyond belief and not getting the sleep and not getting the nutrition. And they're just, grabbing that monster drink to just chug it down in order to get through the next 12 hours. And it's like you just feel like you're just falling further and further and further behind. And so a lot of times it's a topic that we don't necessarily talk about, which is nutrition. Like we get, yeah, sure, we should be eating fruits and vegetables and meats and that type of thing, but recognizing quality and differentiating and saying not all meats are the same and not all vegetables are the same and not all fruits are the same, and not, you know, the nutrition that you're getting, even if you're eating all the right things, they may not be giving you enough of the said vitamin C and D and K and B and fish oil, like all the different things that your body requires in order to do all of the cellular processing that's needed. It just might not be getting that. And so that's where being aware of where you're at with your blood work can be helpful. You can also, if you don't want to spend money on blood work, you can kind of experiment. Like I did that. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination for all those that are saying, you know, go experiment with whatever. Like do it at your own risk, right? Know what you're getting into, do some due diligence and do some work. But there's something to be said for understanding your body at another level that you can start to just become a better version, right? Like the energy that you have might not be the most energy that you've ever had. I heard a quote once and it said, "We are all like a 10-speed bike. We have gears that we've never used." And I think that's true in a lot of ways. I remember back when I was, in my teens, and I was like crushing. I had like 10 jobs throughout the week, and I was just working to try to get as much money because I wanted to go do whatever it was, right? Have money for stupid stuff, being a high school kid. And, I thought I was at the pinnacle. Well, then, I got sick with mono and things went really horribly wrong. And I thought, okay, rebounded and then went into college. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing way more now than I ever did before. New gear. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, I went into my master's program and I was like, oh my gosh, master's program while working full time was just hellacious. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, like this is the next gear." Like I've never there can't be any more that I can be putting on my plate. But then you find efficiencies and you find different hacks along the way and then you get to be more and more. And for all those, for all you guys out there that have a wife, like think of how much more you're getting done while married than you did when you were single and you have somebody else to like think about it and take care of and do things for. Or the guy that was single thinking that he was super busy and then is married and has a kid and now is doing way more things, wearing more hats than he ever did before. And you're still able to get it all done. So there's something to be said for that gear analogy that says, if you feel like you've got an extra gear, maybe you're not even aware of the gear that you don't have, which is like a weird trippy way of saying that, but like test yourself. Do you think this is it? Do you think that this is the most amount of energy that you ever will have in the future? Do you think that what you're doing is the most that you can actually do? And I know, a lot of guys will be like, yeah, bro, like crushing it, like doing, working nonstop and trying to serve everybody, right? Make everybody happy. But it you could do that and more if you had more energy, which is this big domino, which is, hey, maybe there's some micronutrition that you could add in that could make the big difference for you. Um, some cool. So I talked a little bit about myself, like my whole journey on what I had experimented with and was able to um, have really good sort of back to back data, both subjectively, which was I just felt better. I feel more vibrant. I feel more alive. But then also on the objective side, I was able to get a lot more stuff done in a day than I ever had been before. I was able to, travel on a plane surrounded by sick people and push myself to the point where I knew, like when I was in my 20s, I knew if I was pushing so hard for so long, there was that point where I was like, oh, I feel like I'm going to get sick any day. And then all of a sudden, boom, I get sick. And I was thinking that, over this past year where I was like, man, I'm really pushing. I'm burning red line here. Crushing it, like getting a lot of stuff done, but I could just feel like, ooh, I'm pushing this. And I didn't get sick. And I kept maintaining that healthy margin for my immune system. And it really, really impressed myself with how well that worked. Um, Another sort of like I don't want to say value story, but like testimonial, if you will. I have a buddy who has an autoimmune disorder, and he was saying, hey, I'm on this stuff that helps with some pain from the autoimmune disorder. But what it does is it suppresses my immune system. So whenever I get sick, then I get really sick, and then I can't take the pills. So now I'm in pain and sick, and it's just this really awful place to be until I get better, and then I can get back onto the medication. But then that it hurts my immune system, and it just kind of keeps going. So I was telling him about it and showing him all the different studies, and he had said like, "Well, okay, like, sure, you know what? Like, same thing. Like, it's not like I'm asking you to do some like trippy drugs or whatever. Like, it's literally just vitamins." And so he's like, "Sure, you know what? Like, it's fine. It's worth $50 investment. I'll go buy some pills and see what happens." And he did it, and he held true to it. And I think I was like 5 months later or something. I completely forgot about that conversation. And he's like, "I've been meaning to tell you." I haven't gotten sick. And he's like, and this is unprecedented because sickness has like ripped through the family, and I'm the only one that didn't get sick. And he travels a lot for work, and he's like, and I came back, and usually jet lag is a big thing. He'll go over and he'll immediately crash and have to take a nap in order to have enough energy to go through the rest of his trip. And he's like, I was now traveling and not getting jet lagged. Like I'd wake up and I'd just be like, all right, like let's do it. I had energy. And so he had said it was his Usco special. He's like, "I just took my Usco special and I'm just right as rain." And all it was just vitamin D, K, and magnesium. But in that moment, I was like, wow, like maybe this stuff really does work. And if I can get my wife to do it, then that's saying something. And so she, I was making all these pills, taking all these pills or whatever. And I was telling her, I was like, babe, like I got more energy, like I'm doing more stuff. And she even noticed it too, even though she may not want to admit it. And so I was like, I think you need to get on. I think you need to get on this Yuska regimen that we're talking about here. And she's like, all right, fine, I'll humor you, right? Like she does most times. So I appreciate her. I love her for that. Um, but so I started getting her on it, and the really interesting thing happened. So we were debating if we're gonna have another kid or not, which spoiler alert, right? For those that I may not have told yet, but we're considering it. And she had blood work done, and she hadn't had blood work done for a while. Like it's been probably 3 or 4 years, I think. I think she has her yearly regular, but not the level of depths of what you're doing when you're looking at pregnancy or whatever. And, like, all of her biomarkers came back super well, and even people had said, they're like, "Wow, like, Amber," she turned 40 this year, and they're like, "She just doesn't look it, like, she just still looks really young." And she had again attributed it to it where she's like, "I do feel like I have a lot more energy." And she also has, um, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like her scalp is itchy, and when she's under stress or whatever, like, it tends to flare up. And we were in part of the craziness that happened last year, when we were traveling and doing a whole bunch of stuff. Like, there was probably a good month where she just we couple weeks at least, maybe more than a month, like, she just didn't take her pills because we just had been on the go. And just a lot of times when you're on the go, you just all your normal processes kind of fall apart. So she had a perfect turn on, turn off, turn back on test. So didn't take them for a while. Started getting really itchy. They're like, oh yeah, like that skin condition or whatever is earmarked as like an autoimmune disorder or whatever. Um, and so sure enough, I was like, got to get that vitamin D. So she started taking her pills again, her vitamins, and all of a sudden I was like, so how's your scalp? And she's like, it doesn't itch anymore. So again, it's like there's something to be said that it's not just thinking in the placebo effect, but there is something really to be done there. There is something to be said about deficiencies and how long the body can go robbing itself to mask those deficiencies. And it's just, I don't know, it's a really cool thing that I would urge everybody to at least consider. At least maybe, if you just want to get the blood work to just kind of see where you're at. If you just want to try taking a little bit more vitamin D, maybe you haven't even taken vitamins at all to begin with. So just even starting with a multivitamin like phase one is just maybe the right area. Um, you can get into more advanced as you go. Like there's things that later what you'll find is there's certain nutrients that it's like you can't take C and B at the same time because they require the same transmitter, like the uptake piece of this. And so if you take 500 and 500, you're going to get a mixed bag and you're probably not going to get a very efficient uptake on either one of them. So you may be taking all these vitamins, but your body may not be actually absorbing it, that bioavailability piece. So, with that being said, it's like just start. The journey that I was on, like you just had to start. And started with a multivitamin and then started going down the quality. And it was like, okay, now I want to change this out and I want to change this and I want to nip and tuck this. And it was just experiment after experiment to try to find what was gonna be the thing that was gonna help unlock that next gear, what was gonna give me less brain fog, what was going to give me more energy, what was going to help with seasonal depression, right? We live in Cincinnati, so, the fact that it gets really cold and really dark throughout the winter time, right, is a thing, right? It's a real thing. People get blues, they stay inside a lot, they're not outside because it's so cold, and, it's something that we've probably have lived with. Right, as a society, we've just said like, "Oh, well, this is just sort of what happens." But it doesn't mean that we have to. That's the best gift and the best awareness piece that I could give you today is that you don't have to. You get to choose. Do you want to continue to keep living the way that you're living, or do you want to challenge it and say, maybe there's an extra gear somewhere that could help make my daily life a little easier, help to make those resolutions and those goals become a little bit more achievable, um, for what it's worth. Um, what else did I want to cover? I'm just looking through some notes right now. I mean, as always, right, there's no medical claims in any of this. I don't need folks coming at me saying, "Hey, you told me to go trial and error and uh, do it at your own risk." But I did it. I trialed my own risk. But I also recognize, hey, I was going to try it and see what happens. Food first. Obviously, try to get as much food and organic and um, whole meat, right? Whole foods as you can. I think it was, can't remember what the name of the diet was. There was like a diet trend back a couple years ago. It wasn't carnivore. It was kind of like hunter gatherer, but call it food in its original form or food in its natural form. So always go with food first. Supplement quality obviously matters. Um, obviously awareness is bigger than guessing, and small changes can give you big returns. Just adding in little bits of vitamin D, it helped. Vitamin D, K, and magnesium. Um, Getting the electrolytes. We're saltwater beings, right? That's why when we sweat, salt water comes out. So it's not necessarily just fresh water where you just have to just drink a gallon of water a day. It's making sure that you have the right electrolytes so that your body, right, as electrical being can function and do what it needs to. Caffeine. This is the one piece I want to make sure. More caffeine does not give you more capacity. I did a deep dive in caffeine and realized that it basically caffeine when you drink it everyone always thinks like, "Oh, it gives me energy." It just blocks the area of the brain that says you're tired, which is fine. Like that's a great tool to have, but just recognize like it's not saying like you actually have more energy. It just says you're not tired. Um and what I had gone through in my 20s where it was like I was drinking a pot of coffee a day and I would drink it before bed and it doesn't affect me as much. Like I can still drink coffee in the afternoon and not stay up, but that's not that, that's rare. That a lot of people struggle with that. So if caffeine does give you the jitters or you're just crushing like four monsters a day, like working your way to say, how do I get more sustainable? Like how do I, and I get it. Like something we get so used to our patterns that we don't feel like we can get out of it. Um, but sometimes you got to find a different solution. So try something. The biggest thing I can say is just try. Um, because there's something that can help you get all your goals, and that's the one thing that I hope for you listening is that you get your goals. You get whatever it is that you set out for, because life is too cool not to experience and get the things that you ultimately love, that ultimately bring you happiness and fulfillment. It's it's just it's uh, you could go on about that stuff, but I just hope that you get whatever it is that you set out for in January. Um, And we can go deep dive into so many different things, whether it's sleep patterns and systems or the macronutrients. Like we could probably do a deeper dive on macronutrients if y'all want. Um, but the if you were to just take the bits of advice or something from this today, it would just be trial and experiment and see what deficiencies that you have. Start with the top three and just add some more magnesium. Don't get too hung up, like, start with just magnesium. There's probably, like, 4 or 5 different forms of magnesium. Magnesium, like, glycinate, citrate, biglycinate, oxide, and I think there's, like, another one that I might be missing. But there's just a lot of magnesiums. Try them. Try one, see what you feel. Don't say if you try magnesium and it was magnesium oxide and you didn't notice anything, that you don't try the other ones. Like, find the thing, trial and error, the things that are gonna make you feel better. Because the better that you feel, the more that you can go out and accomplish, and the more that you can go out and accomplish, the better your family's gonna be, the better your society is, your local community is gonna be, and the better that overall society is gonna be. Um, you can't lead others unless you lead yourself. So this is one of those areas where, pick up the shovel and get to work, because this can pay big dividends and help you really get out there and really live the life that you really ultimately want. Much like always, you don't need more willpower, you just need a stronger foundation. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you got some things in there for the foundation. So if you have any questions, again, I'm trying this go live on YouTube Tuesdays 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So catch me over there. If you have any questions, put them in the comments, and if not, then we'll catch up. And till then, keep moving forward. Happy Tuesday.